Before, when I asked Chalua what she was searching for, she answered her reason to live. It was you, Shulk. You were her reason to live.
So?
They said I'm teenage and scared the living shit out of me.
Didst thou know that this video is the second half of a two-part episode? If you haven't seen the first part, I'll put a link right about here. Or you can be a complete rebel and just plow through. You know, the world's your fucking oyster, okay? Vincent and Lucrezia had a picnic one time. Character building. Also, turns out Shulk had all of Lucrezia's work uploaded to her brain, along with some of the Doctor's conscience. She half-heartedly offers her services in putting together a full version of the Omega Report. Then the airship guy from the first game shows up, and holy fuck, that is a gorgeous cinematic. They set out for the ruins of Midgar to put down Deep Ground once and for all. Interestingly enough, in terms of gameplay, this level is something of a breather. There's no combat or bosses shoehorned in. Instead, you're allowed to leisurely wander the Shira, talking to some of the WRO and the other leads. This again displays the leanings of the dev team towards slower RPGs, and while it is kind of charming just in its existence, it does bring the pacing of the game to a screeching, grinding halt. Most of the soldiers just spout shit about chocobos and their loyalty to the cause.
But you know, when I realized that this may be my last time up here, my last chance to take a glimpse of the land I call home, I just wanted to get one last look.
Thanks, Margaret, you fucking buzzkill. There's a briefing where Sid and Reeve break down the plan. Shulk projects Lucrezia's report into the bridge, though this is more of a consolidation of what we already know, rather than a revelation of anything new. The ground assault is led by, hey, it's Big Sword Blonde Boy, and his groupies, man and girl. Meanwhile, the rest of the gang are to destroy the Mako reactors under the Shinra building, which are being used to summon Omega. Vincent has another chaos fit outside the engine room, and shortly thereafter the assault begins. Their deployment is shown in another fantastically well done pre-rendered cinematic, with Cloud taking on Rosso, the crew from the Shira dropping on hoverboards, and just a righteous cacophony of shrapnel and carnage from all angles. As it turns out, Vincent misses his drop zone by a large margin, and so starts making his way through a train yard towards Deep Ground. While this stage involves in large part helping WRO squads in the same manner you did in the early game, I do quite like its chaotic layout. It takes thought and effort to convincingly masquerade a linear route as a naturally unfurling string of events in a story-driven context such as this one. I'm not saying Dirge of Cerberus ever achieves that level of immersion, but it does at least make what feels like a sincere attempt. Shulk directs Vincent out of this railcar graveyard via an underground tunnel system. This leads to a boss encounter with these jetpack troopers. Considering that this is basically an inbreeding of the dropship and speeder fights, all the same criticisms carry over. But just to drive the point home, there's nothing boss about this boss encounter. You can put fancy hats on your grunts and have them bumble around on hoverboards all you want. There's just nothing about this worthy of that health bar. The following stage sees Vincent and the WRO storm the fortifications around Midgar's perimeter. It's pretty interchangeable with the level that preceded it, but I find the latter to be much poorer in terms of design, mainly due to the lack of imagination displayed in its abundant straight-shot corridors. At its end, Vincent comes across Rosso again, and the two finally do battle. Her movement patterns are similar to Shulk, her being the other female Sviet, but she incorporates a solid array of ranged attacks along with her melee strikes in both of her two phases. Rosso is among the better boss fights in the game, but given the quality of said fights, saying so is like appreciating a particularly blunt needle of the cactus you just embedded into your face. She does at least go down with a Joker-esque ironic elegance. This brings Vincent to the remains of the Shinra building, but not before he has another chaotic fit. Shulk channels Lucrezia to reveal Chaos's connection to Omega as a sort of harbinger. Then, out of nowhere, the Shira's engines drop out. When Shulk goes below deck to check it out, she finds Nero the Sable, spooky Sviet member from before, fucking around. I like his straitjacket design. There's something menacing about an antagonist restraining themselves and only exercising as much of their power as is necessary. That lack of the classic villain ego. Shulk attacks him, but he does some ang dodging and then consumes her with his shadows. Back in Midgar, Vincent begins his descent towards the reactors. You come across another two attack droids, but as far as I can tell, they're quite literally identical to the one in the manor and therefore are dealt with embarrassingly easily. I should mention that I played through the game on hard mode, because how else am I supposed to get off? So I'd imagine the standard difficulty could be aced by a blind orangutan with Parkinson's. At one point he gets a call from Cloud & Co, which is effectively just them saying, hey, yes, hi, remember us? We're the fan service. There's an elongated progression structure during which Vincent fights twice through an area of offices or laboratories or whatnot, before descending an elevator and repeating. Thankfully, the cycle is interrupted when you find Azul lying in wait. His first phase is largely the same as earlier, and therefore is about as involving as playing Space Quest 2 by proxy via carrier pigeon from the bottom of an oubliette, and yet his second phase is somehow worse. He goes Giga Furry again and tosses you around like a fucking salad. For some godforsaken reason, he can only be damaged by your secondary fire, which I'd virtually never used before this fight. You replenish your, what is this? Mana? Holy water? Gatorade at these pads under cooling fans, which have to be trampled by Azul before you can get to them, and take forever and a day to respawn. His death is pretty cathartic though. Vincent goes full chaos and puts the dude's grenade launcher through his chest. That is pretty fucking metal. Cut to young Vincent in Lucrezia's lab before Squeaky walks in and starts shitting on her hardcore. BT dubs if it's not clear. She infused Vincent with chaos to save him after Ponytail shot him. The stage closes with Vincent coming to the entrance to Deep Ground. There's demon pigs. The level design is a bit more complex and the combat challenge is stepped up, which I can get behind, even if the difficulty curve is less proportional and more fucking logarithmic. What I can't get behind is the new enemy type introduced in this stage, which, like Azul, can only be hit with secondary fire. It's a flawed design choice, not only in how it forces an artificial change in your playstyle, but just because of the sheer conceptual laziness of it. What they've done here is added an enemy type that in no way builds mechanically on its lower tier variants, and instead is actually less interactive than these earlier enemies in being arbitrarily immune to your main method of attack. Don't try and peddle that shit in my market. There's a forgettable railcar ride that leads down to this weird ghost town, the presence of which I'm having a hard time explaining. The grunts don't stop coming as you make your way through the place, giving the whole stage this oblique on-rails shooting gallery feel to it. You have to defeat a few waves on this bridge, then you get hit with some of Nero's shadow juice, but Vinny just brushes it off like it ain't no thing. Shulk's still in there though, feeling sorry for herself and passing the time by going through Lucrezia's memories. She sees the professor at the crystal cave with... That better not be Vincent's dad.
Tell my son that I'm sorry.
Still better not be Vincent's dad. At the same time, Shulk begins to regain control of her own mind and memories. Vincent continues on his way down, passing the fucking Maginot line on his way, before he's intercepted by Nero outside the Big Daddy reactor. The two butt heads to find out who truly is the edgiest of the edgelords. Nero hits you with a near constant barrage of ranged fire, summoning shades of himself to further increase his output. Although limit breaking does make this fight, and really all of the better ones, too easy. Dominant strategy dictates you use what you have at your disposal, but it makes the victories feel pretty hollow, like winning a street fight with a rifle-mounted bayonet. Anyway, Nero isn't actually defeated, and tries his ephemeral blackcurrant bullshit again, but Vincent strolls out unfazed, this time bringing Shulk with him. Shorts turns up, but Nero straight up blanks her and pieces out. They stick Shulk in a rehabilitation vat, cause I guess the things are just lying around, lining the streets, and she spills more of Lucrezia's memories.
This file.
It's none of your business.
But it is. Why didn't you tell me you worked with my father?
Are you fucking kidding me? Why? Who the fuck is Grimoire Valentine? And what's he got to do with fucking anything up to now? What kind of weak sauce attempt at character development and motivation is that? It's so tacked on, it pisses me off that someone was paid the big bucks, or I guess the big yens, to write this bollocks. Vincent barely reacts, his boner for Lucrezia clearly outweighing his grief. And then she goes and commits herself to Dr. Jekyll. I guess she warmed up to the slab of stale bread where his character is supposed to be. This shit has gone so far off the deep end that it's now sitting at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. So Vincent starts pile driving his way through the area that you'll remember was scouted by Epic Mickey, which presents some pleasantly intense combat. Except this bit here. Screw this. Whoever designed this was probably being extorted by their dominatrix. Yeah, mentally parsed that one. This area, and another room full of everything-proof shield losers shortly after, took me something like 30 minutes for what should have taken 3. There's a fight with another gunship. What is this, the 12th one? It's got a load of dudes sellotaped to it, but it's the same shit. Volpes pilum mutat non mores. You meet up with Shorts and at long last enter the reactor room. Vice is fucking dead, GG no re, but Nero pops in to keep them company. He reveals that Omega is to be joined to Vice the same way Chaos was to Vincent, then hits them with the soy sauce as the process begins. Vincent saves Shorts by doing this before Nero engages him in a pocket dimension of his own creation. Also, he's a robot spider now because, what, he's a Darth Maul fanboy? This fight is decent enough in that I can at least say it stands out. These crystals flying around Nero occasionally stop to take shots at you, at which point you have a window to return the favor. When they've all been dealt with, Nero springs to life, but now with his shields down so you can deal damage. At half health, it takes a turn further goofier when you're basically reduced to playing whack-a-mole with him. He stumbles his way up to the now risen Vice when he's done for, but his brother hits him with a stinger and puts him down for good. So this clearly isn't Vice inhabiting this body then. Guess who? This fucking cretin, Hojo. Get a load of this. That was him back at the start, and that program he ran was basically him uploading his fucking brain to the Shinra network, masterminding Deepground and downloading his conscience into Vice. Yes, this weird scientist, the dude who created Sephiroth, who probably believes testosterone is a capitalist myth, is somehow our main antagonist. You could find better payoffs than this on Wall Street circa 1929. Hojo goes full Bond villain and spills his entire scheme, but Vince is as sick of his shit as I am, so combat ensues. Vice's design is markedly mundane compared to the other Sviets, his only defining characteristic being his admittedly kick-ass gunblades. He clobbers you first time round in a bullshit supposed to lose fight, because nothing gets me more invested in the plight of an underdog than an explicit depiction of him not having a chance in hell. After a pep talk with Lucrezia via Shulk, he takes control of the chaos within to use to his advantage. The actual fight is morbidly anticlimactic, being effectively an amalgamation of the other Sviet encounters. It's depressing how easy it is to describe most of the boss encounters and really the latter half of the game by just pointing to their earlier counterparts. It shows a total lack of interest from the developers in delivering a mechanically fleshed out experience to the consumer. Vice dodges about, shoots a few rounds, and hits you with the odd slash. He's a reasonable challenge, but not worth committing to memory in the slightest. Shadow Nero kicks the defeated Hojo out of Vice's body and merges himself with his brother. With this donated power, Vice is able to unite himself with Omega, causing shit to royally hit the fan. In another brilliant cinematic, Omega itself is finally summoned, taking this striking angelic kaiju form. With Vincent going full chaos in retaliation, Shulk uploads herself to the network of souls within Omega, somehow. Yeah, I'd like to see those fucking patch notes, and manages to fire the proto-materia out to Vincent. This is followed by another string of effectively trivial flashbacks. Vincent retrieves Shulk and then conjures up a gun, for even ascended celestial beings bow to the might of black powder. There's a stage segment where you get to play as Chaos Vincent, climbing towards Omega. His new weapon deals an obscene amount of damage, blowing through these antibody things like a brick through the window of the Square Enix offices. However, I don't have any issues with this switch up in gameplay, seeing as this level is quite clearly epilogue. Now you're probably thinking that the story hasn't resolved, so how can this be an epilogue? Well, it's an epilogue in terms of gameplay. The Vice fight was clearly billed and built up to as the final boss, and while it was as dull as an autobiography by the inventor of the butter knife, he served his purpose as that all-important final skill check. This in mind, the following romp as a rejected Hellraiser character is acceptable in context of both gameplay and story as the game meanders to a close. Vincent penetrates his way into Omega after the ground crew cut it off from its supply of souls. I'm just entirely dead inside. You zip through the thing's internals until it spits you back out, at which point you find yourself standing on a bit of Rainbow Road firing at Staryus. Then you go through its headpiece to Vacuous Rom's Lake, I guess. There's this robot kraken thing whose tentacles you have to hit before it rises up for you to finish off. I think the devs had just given up at this point, seeing as it quite literally has no attacks aside from spawning more mobs before it goes up in flames. I would call this padding, but it's so blatant it's comparable to sewing the implants directly onto the front of the dress. Vice wanders out and there's a cutscene of them fighting, but considering at this point the two beings basically exist outside any tangible limitations, their failure to damage each other plays out like a high school video project. Well, more so than everything prior. Vice employs the Power Ranger principle of combat, that being, when in doubt, summon a huge fuck-off mech. Omega Vice here is the actual legitimate No More Giggles final boss, and is, to be fair, aptly realised. There's a solid variety of sweeping melee strikes and pounds along with crystal projectiles, some of which become proximity mines when dodged, all within a semi-dynamic arena. Vice himself will occasionally hop down to slap you around personally. At one point he even fires a fucking small son at you. I also like the sharp wrought iron design going on here. I'd only say that this fight might have been deeper if you were controlling Diet Vincent, But as I've said, I'm okay with limited edition Vincent Rock Shandy contextually at this point. Once you've dealt the killing blow, the thing sinks back into the nondescript abyss from whence it came, taking Vice with it. In a closing cinematic, Omega turns to stone at Vice's defeat, but makes a final attempt to ascend. Vincent counters it with the equivalent of a demonic RKO out of nowhere, causing a continent-sized shockwave that realistically should have eradicated every character you've caught even the slightest glimpse of. Soul juice or ectoplasm or whatever the fuck rains down from the sky as credits roll. Shalua gets the res, Shulk learns how to be a human again, my dick grew 6 inches and a united Ireland was declared. Shulk finds Vincent in Lucrezia's cave. Yes, that's how all those flashbacks tie in, and they preempt that awkward scene from The Force Awakens by nearly a decade. Like a Chinese massage parlor, happy endings all around. I won't pretend that I wasn't aware of Dirge of Cerberus' reputation going into this review. While the game was modestly successful as a release for Square Enix, it was almost unanimously dead on arrival to the core Final Fantasy crowd. Take it from me, Dirge of Cerberus is nowhere near one of the worst games ever made. It's not good, let me just make that crystal fucking clear, but it's a case where its most egregious flaw is how it squanders the potential that I do genuinely think it had. Instead, we got several stretches of dull but competent gameplay overshadowed by some inane design choices. But everyone loves a bit of Bloodsport, so when it was revealed the extent to which this game would differ from its forebear, it was predestined to be a martyr, never to see the light of day. A martyr for what, you may ask? Experimentation and evolution within a series, I suppose. God forbid people try to be original and approach a concept from a new angle in the spirit of creativity, but I digress. Now that I've shown myself to be as neutral as a glass of Swiss water, let's get some actual critiques rolling. Of the peaks along this neon sine wave of a game, a few stand above the rest. That's not how a sine wave works. First of all, the production values and presentation are classic Squeenix fare, so equal parts exuberant and garish, with great character animations, a decent selection of color palettes, weighty SFX, and an appropriately edgy soundtrack, some of which was provided by this dude Gackt, who was apparently a big deal back in the old Nihon. And let's not forget those cinematics, which had a big stupid grin on my face each time without fail. These elements combined result in a game world oozing with flavor, that flavor being glitter glue and tear stained mascara. Though it's fair to say that this isn't integrated into gameplay to any great extent. Vincent handles smoothly and responsively. Oh, excuse me, that was an excerpt from my fanfic. Vincent's controls are robust and the camera thankfully does as it's told most of the time. The streamlined gunplay for me was acceptable and to an extent fits the tone of proceedings, even if I realize that it sacrifices the complexity of the staple turn-based Final Fantasy combat for an undeniably lightweight TPS implementation. The gun customization was interesting in theory, but I settled on a build about a quarter ways in and was never motivated to change it. The level design runs the gauntlet from mediocre to tedious, and the enemy variety is lacking, this being amplified by the poor design of some later game units. The enemy placement is so god-awful in some places that I have to question the mental faculties of the QA team. The boss fights are a mess, frequently similar to the point of interchangeability, and that's when the game doesn't just cut the pretense and unabashedly recycle them. The VII fights are baseline, they're okay, excluding this giant congealed steroid in baggy sweatpants, but the rest are tacked on, often being way too easy on top of being more effective sleep aids than a pint of NyQuil. And then we must talk about the story. What a total fucking fever dream. There's way too much of it for a start, the cutscene to gameplay ratio was nonsensical, and there's some straight redundant subplots, clearly in an attempt to bulk up this flashy but anemic little tale. The characterization is, well, it's barely there. Whatever trope springs to mind when you look at any of these characters is more often than not an accurate representation of their personality and motivation. The only character I was genuinely invested in was Shulk. I found her arc, searching for purpose and slowly developing her own morals, unironically compelling. And don't try and tell me that this game ruined Lucrezia or destroyed the lore of the original. I'll confidently bet blind that the story of the first game, with Sephiroth and Shinra and Meteorfall and so on, was equally as batshit as this one. And even in the case where it wasn't, I'll believe it when I fucking see it. Holding the writers at Square Enix up as examples of masterful storytellers is like holding your chocolate milk up as an example of aged vintage wine. So Dirge of Cerberus, a game where Tommy Wiseau murders a cybercult with a gun he bought on Etsy. I can at least say I'm interested in checking out some more Final Fantasy games off the back of this. I definitely count that as a win of sorts for old Vinny. Well, what do you know, the Vin man finally found a heart. Hello there ladies and gents, and thank you very much for watching. I've been staring at anime haircuts for the past 4 months or so as you can imagine I'm ready for the fucking noose. I tried to be a bit more expedient in getting this one out, and I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, perhaps you'd consider dropping a comment or a like, sharing the video, or even subscribing to the channel. Regardless, I hope you have a wonderful day. I'm gonna go play something with a bit more depth to cleanse my palate, like solitaire.